and today I'm going to be presenting on the 1936 Berlin Olympic Games, which are also known as Hitler's Olympics. So, on August 1st, 1936, the Games officially opened, and 49 nations were in attendance. So, why did I choose the Olympics to study? Well, we had to choose our research topics shortly after the Rio Olympics ended, and I've always been interested in the historical aspect and the politics behind the Olympic Games, so I decided to research the most controversial games, and I chose to research the Berlin 1936 Games. And my presentation is mostly going to be a historical analysis of these Olympic Games. So Germany after World War I had a lot of problems due to its defeat and having to sign the Treaty of Versailles. It had a lot of economic problems due to all of the reparations that it had to pay back for the damages that it caused. And this caused a lot of high tariffs and extremely high inflation. And they also had a lot of political problems due to all the territory that they lost to the Allies. And they also had a shift in government at this time when the Weimar Republic took over. And all this information was obtained from our Western Civilization textbook. So in 1933, Adolf Hitler rose to power by being appointed Chancellor, and the Enabling Act soon came into effect, which Namjae-cho defines that which allowed Hitler to pass laws without the approval of the legislative branch, and this eventually led to Hitler's dictatorship and his anti-Semitism in the Aryan race. And then in 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed, which took away German citizenship from the Jews. And in the documentary Hitler's Olympics, which was directed by Edward Cotterill, historians state that Hitler actually first opposed the Olympics taking place in Berlin, and this was because the modern Olympics were founded on Anglo-Saxon, Western, and democratic ideals. So the background of the 1936 Games: in 1931, the International Olympic Committee voted to award the Games to Berlin, and Cotterill explains that this was seen as an opportunity for Germany to re-enter the international world and regain itself after its devastating losses in World War I. But there was a lot of worldwide opposition that formed after Hitler came to power, and this led to the start of boycott movements, according to Cho. So specifically in Spain, they created an alternative Olympic Games, which was known as the People's Olympiad, and 6,000 athletes in 22 countries were expected to attend, but they actually had to cancel these alternative games because of the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War. And the boycott movement was also extremely strong in America. And the president of the American Olympic Committee, which was Avery Brundage, he opposed the boycott movement, and he's famous for saying that the Olympic Games belong to athletes and not the politicians. And according to the Holocaust Museum, Judge Jeremiah Mahoney, who was the president of the Amateur Athletic Union, supported the boycott movement because he felt that if America sent its athletes to Berlin, that we were supporting the Nazi ideals and their actions of discrimination against the Jewish people. But what's ironic about this is that at the same time, African Americans were being discriminated in the United States under the Jim Crow laws. So Germany was very innovative when it had held these games. According to James Pitzula, they created the first torch relay, and the torch was carried from Greece to Germany and then into the Olympic Stadium, and this actually represents the link between the Germans and the ancient Greek gods. And another innovative thing was it was the first Olympic Games to be broadcasted live on television, so it kind of made the Olympics the spectacle that it is today. And then the history place describes the prestigious Olympic village that the Germans put on. They provided athletes with servants who spoke their language, television to watch live coverage of the games, an enormous dining hall, and training facilities such as a track, pool, and gym. So they basically set the bar for all the other Olympics that came afterwards. So propaganda was a big part of Hitler's reign, and this was easily exemplified during the 1936 Olympic Games, and it was administered by Joseph Goebbels, who was the Minister of Propaganda. So they cleaned up the streets of Berlin before people came in for the Olympics, and they did this by removing all anti-Jewish signs and they also sent the gypsies off to the concentration camp. There was also a lot of heavy control of media, and this was done, and they made sure that the media was constantly praising Berlin and the Nazis, and they weren't allowed to mention any athletes' races, which they couldn't say that an athlete was Jewish or that an athlete was African American. And they created a lot of propaganda posters for the games, and they again exemplified the link between the Aryan race and the ancient Greeks. And the athletes were depicted on the posters as being heroic blue-eyed blondes with fine features like those on classical statues. And then lastly, they lined their streets of Berlin with swastika flags and Olympic flags to show that the nation represented the Olympic ideals. And all this information was obtained from the Holocaust Museum and Nathan Cody from Gettysburg College. So the Holocaust Museum also points out the major issue of racism and anti-Semitism during the Olympic Games. So Germany actually excluded mostly German Jews from the Olympic team, including some world-class athletes such as boxer Eric Sieglin, track and field athlete Lily Hennick, and tennis player Daniel Pren. But because of all the worldwide opposition that occurred, they did allow 2 Jewish athletes to be named to the German team, which were Helen Mayer, who was a fencer, and Gretel Bergmann, who was a high jumper. But they put enormous pressure on these 2 athletes to win gold. But then 2 weeks before the games were about to start, they actually kicked Gretel Bergmann off of the Olympic team because they didn't want too many Jews competing underneath of the German name. But Helen Mayer actually did compete, and she didn't win gold like she was expected to, and she ended up winning silver, and this is her on the podium. And then there was also a lot of Jewish athletes from around the world who boycotted the games personally themselves, such as Milton Green, who was an American track star. And then there was a lot of worries about African Americans traveling to the Olympic Games in Berlin, but a majority of the African American athletes didn't agree with the boycott, and they actually wanted to go to Berlin because they felt that they had a good chance at winning and that they could destroy the Aryan supremacy myth and renew Black pride. So according to Cody, the German team ended up at the top of the medal count with a total of 89 medals, including 33 gold. And the American team was second with 56 total medals and 24 gold. And the most famous victories were from Jesse Owens, who was an African American track athlete, and he won a total of 4 gold medals in 4 events, and he broke 11 Olympic records. So overall, the 1936 Olympic Games can be seen as successful because the Nazis were able to put on this facade to the world by creating impressive facilities, using their propaganda, and being very innovative and having very good hospitality to the world. But in Hitler's eyes, they were seen as a failure because his Aryan race was defeated. According to the Holocaust Museum, 10 African Americans won a total of 14 medals, and 9 Jewish athletes won a combined 10 medals. So it just all depends on which way you look at it. They can be seen as successful in the way that they kind of stage the world, and a lot of their innovation is still used today. But at the same time, athletes that were seen as racially inferior at the time, like Jesse Owens, were able to put a stop to the Aryan supremacy myth. And these are my resources.